Welcome to the AYU Academy Open House. We are going to cover some questions today on the Svastha Acharya program, the professional program for the Ayurvedic Health Coach level at AYU Academy. And we may get more people joining, but until then, Stephanie, we are going to get all of your questions answered exactly as you want them.
Great.
So thank you for joining today. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm so glad that you were referred to AYU Academy. Do you want to start off and kind of give me a little overview of what you'd like to learn today?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you. And so nice to meet you too. Pretty much, I'm just wondering like how your program differs from other programs. And I'm aware of Sanskrit and just a little bit about what it will look like. For like the first year, the second year, beyond that, like the role of mentorship. Yeah. We can start there.
Perfect, thank you. So studying Ayurveda outside of India is something that is not well understood by the mainstream, I would say. And that's the first point to make. So in order to get a better perspective on that, it's helpful to know how Ayurveda is studied in India. And the minimum level of study that is required in India to call one any sort of Ayurvedic practitioner is 5.5 years of full-time Ayurvedic medical education. That's about 8,000 hours total. And so it's enormous, the difference between the expectations of inside India versus outside India. Now, of course, most people outside of India are not going to be in a position to commit to that level of time, money, study, and also practice, right? Where do most people go with Ayurveda after this? There are not that many options, although it's increasing, but it's still a big gray zone. Some people will try to connect it with yoga practices, yoga therapy practices, or other types of physical training, physical exercise practices, and that's fine. But ultimately, the practice of Ayurveda in India is done by an Ayurvedic doctor who has studied all aspects of the science, from the basic principles all through the medicines, through all of the diseases, and has practiced the application of all of this combined. So this is part of why it's such an intense study. Okay, it's not a weekend thing. It's not a 1-year thing. It's not even a 2 or a 3-year thing, really, to get to the Ayurvedic doctor level. And so a lot of the education that exists in the US today really misrepresents the practice of Ayurvedic medicine as a true healthcare, true medical system. Okay, so it's helpful, like you've done, to think about what you want to be able to get out of study. What are your expectations, and what do you want to achieve in 1 year of study? And how is that going to set you up for year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on and so forth? So one of the main differences with AYU Academy is that the first year of study, the SA program or the Svastha Acharya program, is extremely intense. It is a very accelerated program. It is perhaps, I'd go out on a limb to say it's the most difficult program for professional Ayurveda outside of India today. The level of education is above and beyond any of the other schools that exist today. As you already recognized, Sanskrit is a requirement to start out with. Western anatomy and physiology, also a major requirement to start out with. The amount of memorization that happens in this program is beyond, it's probably 3 to 10 times more than any other program.
Right.
The amount of reading required, again, 3 to 10 times more than any other program. A major difference that may not mean much right now, but in our first year in the SA program, we cover 4 of the major classical texts in brief, like as a summary. We kind of just plow right through just to get a bird's eye view of things, and that includes the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Hridaya, and Bhava Prakasha. Many schools, even after 2 or 3 years, will not even teach students how to open those texts, how to read them, or how to understand them in any way. They tell the students to get the books, but that's it. That's the end of it. They don't tell them how to learn from those texts. And in India, these are the seminal texts. Like, we literally will take the Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita into the hospital every day during the last 12 months of our 5.5 years of study, which is our externship or our internship in the hospital. And we'll open those books every single day and look at the patients and assess the patients and look at the text and compare which signs and symptoms do we see in this presentation and to what degree. What is their grade? Where are the doshas located? How is the pathology moving through the body? How do we understand where it wants to go? How do we research and understand what the nidana or the causative factors are? How do we get to the root of this pathology so that we can break it and reset and restore the person as best as possible back to their original state? That's the essence of practicing Ayurveda. If anyone wants to get to that level, minimum 4 years of full-time study, minimum. If they come from a medical background, meaning they are a medical doctor or a nurse, preferably, a nurse with quite a few years of practice, or a nurse who has gone into higher education beyond just the Bachelor of Nursing degree, or a doctor from any other stream of medicine, like a chiropractor. Okay. If we have somebody of that sort of background, then this time requirement decreases significantly because they've already learned half of what we need, which is the Western side. So to learn Ayurveda properly, we have to combine classical Ayurveda with Western anatomy, physiology, pathology, pathophysiology, and the study of medicine as it is today. Okay? Biomedical investigations, blood work, labs, diagnostic tests, understanding the basics of emergency management, understanding the basics of Western medical management and interventions. Why? So that when we have patients who are in serious conditions, we know what our boundaries are. We know how to overlap or minimize the overlap of treatment methodologies when required. So this is a pretty serious ask because now you're looking at, from the Ayurvedic side alone, I mean, there's like tens of thousands of lines of Sanskrit shlokas, verses that have to be studied and understood. So yes, this is going to take time, and then all of that has to be correlated to the Western nearest equivalent. I would never say one-to-one exact Western equivalent because it does not exist that way. Our paradigms are totally different in most respects, but not all. And so we have to have a good sort of mastery over both systems in order to see where these correlations exist. Right? So the SA program was designed to give students the best broad overview of the practice of Ayurvedic medicine as a whole and go down into the depths of Siddhanta, which are the basic principles of Ayurvedic medicine. And these include things like doshas, dhatus, malas, ojas, right? Even some basic treatment principles. I'm not going to go through an exhaustive list here because I don't want to turn it into that kind of class. But we cover all the basic mechanics so that when graduates of the SA program start working with folks outside, they at least know the scope of what they want to practice and focus on, and they know what many students from other schools don't even know exists because they were never exposed to this in the first place.
Great.
Right. At least now, right, graduating, it's like you know how complex this thing can get, and you'll have a better ability to judge whether or not the person is a good fit for your level of practice. Okay, another major difference is that the idea, the plan of this is that students graduate, they complete level 1, which is the SA level. And then if they want to go on to further training, those programs are in process of being developed. They have a long way to go. But level 2, the PC or parivarjana program would be an Ayurvedic doctor's assistant. Level 3 would be an Ayurveda Acharya, which is the Ayurvedic doctor, which has to be on equivalent grounds as the BAMS degree in India. And again, that being 5.5 years of full-time medical education, 8,000 hours. The number of people who are actually going to go to that level are few and far between, in all honesty. And so the best option at this point in time is that people who really think they do want to go to that and who are young enough and capable enough, go to India and do it there. Because there's no way that in the next 20 years, we are going to properly be able to replicate the depth of training that happens in India outside of India. There's just no way, in my opinion, unless we get some big money falling out of the sky. Because there's a lot of infrastructure that's needed, hospitals are needed, clinics are needed, the whole setup has to be built. And so what we start to see is with the SA program, what I'm doing with students is training the SAs, or the Ayurvedic Health Coaches, to be able to work collaboratively for Ayurvedic clinical care. And what that means is that the SA works with an Ayurvedic doctor in a subset of the total care package. So the Ayurvedic doctor would be planning and kind of managing the entire treatment plan. And this would include all aspects. The 4 main aspects of treatment are ahara, diet, vihara, lifestyle, aushadha, medicines, and kriya, treatments. And this kriya thing, the treatments thing, is, again, a great example of why this is going to take a long time to replicate outside of India, because to expect that patients all around the country, of any country, whether it be the US or anything, where are they going to get reasonably priced access to a clinic where they can go in and get treatments anytime? It's very, very difficult to set that up. It's extremely expensive to maintain something like that. So in the meantime, what I do is I ask patients and clients to try to do their best to do these things on themselves at home. And so we lose some of the integrity of the practice because we don't have professionally trained therapists actually performing the treatments as effectively and efficaciously as they would have been done in the clinic or in the Panchakarma theater. So that's a good example of an adaptation as it is today, that students, all professional students of Ayurveda, should understand this. Like, what is our gold standard of practice and where are we now in comparison to that? And how much should we expect that Ayurveda can offer benefits because of these adjustments, right? So because it takes so much time for students, graduates to see all these kinds of examples and to get that experience, mentorship is a key part of the learning process. And you mentioned that you're curious about that as well. How does that work? For AYU Academy graduates from the SA program, what I do is I offer them the option to work with me after the program, after they complete the program, and we do everything online. Meaning I do everything online. If the SA wants to work with folks in person, they're totally welcome to, but it's not necessary. And
Where
so,
are you located?
I'm in the East Coast right now in the US.
Okay.
Mhm. I do move around a lot. I travel a lot. I have moved around a lot in the past, and so sometimes my time zone is a little bit off. But yeah, the reality is that, like, anybody around the world can do this if they have the motivation to do it. Meaning anybody can be a patient or a user of Ayurveda for their own personal health benefits. And so the SA after graduation is like the facilitator of that. Their primary job responsibilities are, number one, nidana, parivarjana. And what that means is identification and correct removal of causative factors of disease. The Sanskrit phrase is nidana, parivarjana. And it's one of our primary methods of treatment or intervention. And there's a huge amount of education that goes around with this. Well, why should I take a shower first thing in the morning versus, at night or after a meal? Same principle as don't go swimming half an hour after a meal, right? So a lot of this is kind of common sense at the same time, but we don't culturally think about it that way. And so the essay level of training is geared to program the essay's mind to understand what are all the reasons behind all these treatment principles. Why do we live day to day like this? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What are the contraindications to living life in certain ways, right? And so that's the primary thing that the essay works on with patients and clients after graduating. Now, in conjunction with an Ayurvedic doctor, this works out great because the essay can spend more time educating the individual on how to apply this in a healthy, productive way. And the Ayurvedic doctor can spend more time on the aushadha or medicine aspect and the kriya, the treatment aspect. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Awesome. So does that kind of answer your questions about maybe some of the differences?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know so much about what's going on at the University of Health Sciences in Southern California, but I know that was like another big one. And I think, right off the bat, you're going to lose huge amount of like the medicine and treatment if you don't have Sanskrit. So you had mentioned the 4 texts that you take in the textbooks. I don't speak any Sanskrit right now. So are those books completely in Sanskrit?
Fantastic question. So, no.
They're not. Okay.
All classical Ayurvedic literature is in Sanskrit.
Okay.
And most of this literature has been translated into dozens of different languages over time.
Oh, okay.
This is where there's so much disconnect because the primary and the best translations are in Hindi and Malayalam.
Oh, okay.
So it's like playing the telephone game.
Yeah.
Basically, right? Now we get these translations in English, and God bless Indians. They are such wonderful, intelligent, competent, capable people. They have translated these things into dozens of different languages, right? But, English, of course, they do their best. It's not exactly maintaining the integrity and the essence of the science. And so students should not and cannot expect to simply pick these 4 texts up and let me hate you and go read it, right? First page to the last page, and I'm going to learn and understand Ayurveda. In fact, most of these texts were written in a very confusing way. And I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but that's what we have today. And what we often say in India is that a text like the Charaka Samhita is meant for an Ayurvedic doctor. It is not a beginner's text. And so a new student to Ayurveda coming and picking this up and saying, hey, let me read this, they're going to be at a total loss. Like you literally have to have the entire text memorized to be able to start at the beginning and read it all the way through to the end for it to make sense.
Okay.
So it's not like educational material that exists, especially in English in the US today for medical studies, or especially Western medical studies. It's not like that at all.
Got it. Can I ask a few more questions?
Yes, please.
Okay. So you had mentioned 3 different like 3 different programs. The assay, the Pacharya, and then the doctor. Sorry, I'm butchering this Sanskrit. So after the level 1, so you teach the level 1. Do you also teach the level 2? Because I thought I saw that on your site.
It is on the website because eventually those programs will be ready. Part of
Okay.
the thing is getting these programs up and running, and which I've been doing pretty much on my own, is an enormous task. And so even for the SA program, I've written a 6-volume textbook series on this,
Oh my God.
three of which are available on Amazon right now. All in all, this is going to be about 2,000 pages.
Wow.
And they're all in varying levels of completion, anywhere from say 65 to like 95% complete. And so I've got to get that part done first.
Okay.
Now the Parivarjana level, which is level 2, that will be done eventually. And I don't want to say any dates or times or anything like that. But the reality is that because the SA program is so intense, students actually need to go through that very rigorous accelerated academic training first, and then do a year of practice.
After the assay program.
Exactly.
Okay. And now where would one do the year of practice?
So all of my students so far, all the graduates so far, for the most part, are doing it online.
Are they doing it with you, or
Yep.
Are they doing it with another doctor?
Some are doing it with me and some are doing it with other doctors.
Okay. And so they're part of, you said it's the identification and correct removal of disease. So you're basically,
Causative factors of disease.
okay. And so you're just basically taking like their chart and putting it online for the student to glean the information and then help in the correct identification of it.
Correct. So
Okay.
we have a very elaborate online, totally customized, essentially patient management system.
Oh,
all
okay.
in a HIPAA compliant format. So it's all in Google Workspace and it's all secured. We have a massive amount of information that graduates will be able to learn from by working with people in this format. And so this is a great benefit because just imagine, you're a very studious type of person. So you go through these rigorous programs, and then at the end of it, you're very good at regurgitating the information. But when you go to sit down to actually do it, right, you have to sit and think about it a little bit. You have to go through the motions of practice, right?
Absolutely. So that would essentially be year 2. Year 1 is the program. Year 2 is the, basically working with you or working with another doctor.
Correct.
And then by that point, would the second portion of your program be done?
Hopefully. Again, I've tried in the past to push this through, but there's still a lot that I need to do with the first 6 textbooks. And in order to get the Parivarjana program up and running, there's going to have to be a lot more textbooks that are written for that. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hello.
We're just going through some questions here on AYU Academy and the SA program.
I'm sorry, I just joined and I joined pretty late, I guess. I'm sorry about that. I couldn't get the time zones right.
No problem. Welcome. We're happy to see you here. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, so please carry on. I'll
Thank
listen.
you.
Yeah.
I'll actually take a quick break. I need to grab my charger. 1 second. I'll be
Go for
right
it. Go for it. Take your time, Stephanie. So are you in India?
No, I'm in Japan.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's early morning out here around 7:30. I logged in about half an hour ago, 45 minutes ago, but then it hadn't started. I'm not sure about the time.
No
So,
problem. Yeah. We just
again.
started half an hour ago.
Oh, sorry about that. I missed most of it, I guess.
Okay, so
Right.
we are recording this now, just so you know, this is being recorded. and
Okay.
I'll probably end up sharing it on YouTube so other potential students can benefit as well.
Okay, I think I'll catch up later, I guess.
Sure. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask?
Well, I don't know what has been spoken about, so not sure about what questions I would ask. But in general, what did you speak about?
So we basically just discussed the SA program, which is the Svastha Acharya program, the Ayurvedic Health Coach, and what it looks like to go through that rigorous academic education for 1 year and then come out and practice in the collaborative style practice that I'm training students for in terms of the SA doing the nidana parivarjana, focusing on ahara and vihara, the Ayurveda Acharya focusing on the Aushadha Kriya aspects, and kind of how that all fits together, and that we do pretty much all of this online.
Oh, I see. Okay. Mhm. How long is this course?
It's about 12 months. And
Oh.
prerequisites include Sanskrit, another course called AYU 100, and that's kind of just a general understanding of the current state of Ayurveda historically as well,
Mhm.
and Western A&P, of course, college level.
Okay. So is there a certificate or something you get after you finish the course? Is there an exam that you
Yes.
have to pass? Okay.
Very good question, actually, Stephanie. You'd be, I think you'll appreciate this as well. So, this program is very academically rigorous. It's, like I said at the beginning, it's one of probably I would say, the most highly demanding program for professional Ayurveda outside of India today. And there are lots of exams throughout the entire program. So, just about every 7 weeks, we'll either have midterms or finals. So one semester, like there's semester 1 and semester 2, those are both 15 weeks each. So midway point, we do midterms. At the end of the semester, we do the finals. And for all examination periods, there are both written as well as oral examinations, just as there are in India. And oral examinations, the student sits with me for about an hour, and I go through and just chop, get whatever I can find in terms of where there might be holes and where there might be things missing. So most Western students are not used to doing oral examinations, and they get very, very nervous. And this is fine because it's part of the process of learning how to be in a nerve-wracking position under scrutiny, as will happen when you go to actually practice. So it's that in and of itself is a great benefit to build up the students' confidence levels and get them to practice speaking these things aloud and explaining the principles in this sort of format. The written examinations are all multiple choice, and they're simply in Google Forms. There's usually about 15 to 25 questions per exam, and we usually have semester 1 has 5 courses altogether, and semester 2 has 3 courses, and so the time that we spend varies on each. But the entire program is also cumulative, which means that by the time the students reach the final exam at the end of semester 2, any question from the entire program can be asked. The expectation is that none of this knowledge just go in one side and come out the other, because it doesn't work like that, right? When we come to actually practice, we must retain the entire volume of all of the information that we've learned and be able to have it at the forefront of the mind to apply it and understand how we're seeing this in the patient or client. And so there's a massive expectation for memorization in this program. And Stephanie, that's probably, if I had to pick one thing that was different, the most important difference between AYU Academy and all of the other programs of Ayurveda outside of India is the flat out rote memorization and the expectation of that throughout the entirety of the program.
Great. I love that.
Awesome.
So, question on the books. So what's required for the first year with the books?
Lots of books. And you can see on the AYU Academy website what that entire list is and all the links for it. But basically, my 6 volumes the first 3 of which are on Amazon, and the
Okay.
second half, volumes 4, 5, and 6, these are still in digital form. So only active students in the SA program are able to access these. At the beginning of semester 2, I will release those, and students can print the whole thing out on their own. But otherwise, they're not publicly available just yet. And there's still a huge amount of content. Like I said, it's going to be about 2,000 pages altogether across all 6. And so getting all of that edited, formatted, and paginated and everything is just a big job.
Got that.
Okay, so those 6 volumes are there, plus Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Hridaya, Bhava-prakasha. All 4 of those texts must be ideally purchased and had on hand as physical copies. We do have a wonderful resource nowadays called the Charaka Samhita Online. And this is an amazing project. It's such a wonderful gift that has been provided to the Ayurvedic community today, where the entirety of the Charaka Samhita text is online and available, searchable, and translated into English. It also, very importantly for Western students, is available in the original Sanskrit, like the Devanagari script, which 99% of students are not going to be able to read, and then given in its transliterated Latin script, which all AYU Academy students can read. Now, there's a difference between reading and comprehending. There's a difference between reading, comprehending, and translating. There's no expectation that students at this level, after simply 1 year, are going to sit down and translate the Charaka Samhita. No way. Nor would that be an expectation for any text of Ayurveda, because to do that, somebody needs to go and sit and study Sanskrit full time for 3 to 5 years, in addition to studying Ayurveda. So we rely on these translations, but what I always remind students of is, yes, you're reading the text, but you're not reading the real text. You're reading the translation. And that's not exactly what the text was saying. So we have to go back and look at the transliterated part. We have to go back and look at those Sanskrit terms and break the shlokas down word for word and try to pick one word from the next and try to see what the original term is, because that means something in a much broader scope usually than the English translation. And that's a huge difference also that AYU Academy students get compared to other schools, because most schools, as you noted, Stephanie, they do not require Sanskrit. And so we lose a huge amount of the integrity of this knowledge base simply by closing the door on the language of it. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They may tell students to go learn Sanskrit after the fact, which I, for one, never understood. Why would you learn it after you studied Ayurveda? So here, sensibly, it should be front-loaded. And if somebody can't get through the Sanskrit, well, there's no way they're going to get through Ayurveda. Learning Sanskrit up front opens up the memory banks, and it gets students to start slotting space in their memory banks in an organized way, so they can start looking at the science in an organized way, realizing that the practice of Ayurveda, the study and the understanding of Ayurveda, is a very structured but extremely complex science. So we have to learn how to think about it in addition to what it actually is.
So is it possible? I mean, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of Sanskrit. And you're not going to maintain the integrity of the medicine without the use of Sanskrit. I totally get that. So you had said earlier on, you know, if you're like young enough, if you're ready, the best thing to do is just like go to India, where you can really get all of this information. If you want to go through with, you know, the full 5 years, beginning 5 years to get through the doctorate, is it possible to learn that information to be able to practice at that level, like really truly diagnose accurately and treat in the US without going to India?
I would say yes, only with caveat that the student is capable of maintaining their own level of motivation and drive
Okay.
to accomplish that goal, and have the expectation that this is going to take 5 to 10 years,
Okay.
because life is going to get in the way, right? At least when you're in that sort of structured academic environment, like in India, exams are coming. They're not going to move the exam date, no matter how much somebody cries and says, oh, I can't do it, right? But if you're outside of that and you're at home and you've got your job or your family, or it's very easy to say, well, I'm not really ready. Let me just do it next month. And time will slip by that way. And the amount of information that has to be memorized is astronomical. I don't think anybody really appreciates or understands how much this is. And so for somebody to have that push on themselves to keep memorizing, that it takes a lot. And I think for the most part, very few people are actually capable of doing that, but somebody's got to be out there who can.
Might know one.
I hope so. I would love to find them. Believe me, wherever they are, tell them to come to me, please.
Cool. Okay, I love that. Thank you.
Just a comment. I started studying Sanskrit online since the last 1 month or so. I have the advantage that I know the Devanagari script, so it's easy for me to catch up. So, it's going to open up, once I learn Sanskrit, so it's going to open up a whole new world for me, including, so I was wondering what's in it for, what all can I learn? How can I benefit? So one of the things was Ayurveda, the Rig Vedas, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, all the epics are there. So the reason I came in here to this meeting is to understand what I could pick up if I learn Sanskrit, whether it would be easier for me to pick up Ayurveda by reading the actual text, and how long it will take and things like that. So that is one of the reasons I thought of attending this meeting. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Learning, the better one knows Sanskrit, the better they will be able to read classical literature. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can interpret and learn how to practice just out of reading it that way. Because, again, a lot of the translations and the essence of the vocabulary, the essence of the terms, like how do we actually see that in practice? For example, there is a sign or symptom, as well as the name of a disease called Pandu. And Pandu means kind of like pale in complexion, right? So it may be the presentation of anemia. It may be the presence of temporary pallor in the individual. And so the actual application of that, now what do we do about it? How do we find the root cause for it? How do we manage it? How do we test where the doshas are, what they're trying to do, what their quantities are, what their grades and levels and intensities are, right? So that practical, bringing it, that last step into practice is still going to require, I think, an instructor or some sort of organized, structured training environment. But having that ability to read the Sanskrit text is simply going to make the whole process of learning Ayurveda that much easier. What I find with a lot of the Western students that I get to work with is that this is like, they've got to learn everything. And what I mean by everything is they have to learn a lot of things that Indians culturally already know, because they've been exposed to these things. They've grown up with these things, right? And so it's just like, oh, so mostly they're not going to fight these concepts. They're not going to sit there and think, oh, that sounds so weird. Is that really how it works? I don't know, right? Whereas with Western students, like this is, we go to upside down land with this. And their whole world has to change in order for them to really get their mindset into thinking in that way. And that's also where a lot of the time investment goes, and especially in the first 2 years of learning. Does that make sense? So to practice this for oneself in their daily life is a huge benefit, because that helps overcome that hurdle as well of being able to realize that, hey, this actually works. Hey, this is actually a thing. And if we have certain concepts, how do we pick up on the subtle signs and symptoms that are kind of indicating that a certain dysfunction is happening, or the doshas are skewing in a certain direction, right? How do we tell that that's happening in real life, in the moment when it's actually happening? And so that kind of practice really has to start with oneself before they can just expect to like be able to see it in somebody else. So with the study of Sanskrit, my primary expectation for students, especially Western students, is that this is simply a vocabulary exercise. So what I do is I try to split Sanskrit, meaning there's the understanding of the terminology, having the vocabulary down, just simply like memorizing the English dictionary, versus the grammar. And I'm splitting this on purpose because Sanskrit grammar is one of the most complex languages in the world. And most native English students would take at least 2 years of full-time study to really get their minds wrapped around Sanskrit grammar. Now, if any students have had or studied Latin in their scholastic history, or German, those languages carry a similar structure in that they are declension-based languages where the endings of the words change based on the usage of the term in the sentence. So the construct of the sentence in Latin, in German, in Sanskrit, even in Malayalam today, is all this declension-based style. And so again, these folks who come out of languages like that, like the Keralites, the people from the state of Kerala who speak Malayalam as their native language, or Germans. Look at how much the Germans have taken Ayurveda and run with it. It's because their minds are already in that state of thinking, because their language is structurally similar to Sanskrit. But native English speakers are at a huge fault on this one, because the grammar of English is so overly simplified that coming into Sanskrit is like it's an enormous hurdle in and of itself. So that's why I split the two, the grammar versus the vocabulary, and just have the expectation that students are going to memorize vocabulary and terms and have the understanding of what that conceptually means, rather than trying to pick up the text and say, oh, that's the verb of the sentence, and that's dual case, and that's the subject, and that's that case, right? That kind of exercise is not productive, especially for most Ayurvedic students, to be honest.
I have just gotten into Sanskrit, but I thought it's a very structured language, especially the grammar. And if you've already done one of the Indian languages, since I've already done Hindi, I find it much easier to absorb the rules and find it a lot more easier, I think, from my perspective. And everything is based on rules, and the pronunciation is also, if you come to English, if you take the word door or something, D-O-O-R, and if somebody says door, you don't know whether it's the entrance to a house, or it's, D-O-U-R, or a piece, P-I-E-C-E or P-E-A-C-E. You pronounce it the same way, but you don't know what you mean. That kind of confusion is not there in Sanskrit at all. And another advantage is that every alphabet has a meaning. So if you combine a couple of letters into a word, you can get the meaning of the word, unlike English or anything like that. So it's a very beautiful and very structured language. Of course, I've been only for the initial part of the thing, but I already find it very useful, and I think it's going to open up a lot of new doors for me.
Wonderful. Yeah, I strongly encourage you to go as far as you can with it, because you come with this advantage of knowing Hindi already. And so it will be a much easier transition to learn the language. And not only is the language itself so well structured, which is literally what the word Samskrita means. Sam, which is the prefix, means well done, and krita.
Perfect. Yeah.
So it's a perfectly constructed language. It's the name of the word. That's what the word means. So perfect, so much so that Panini, the father of Sanskrit grammar, when he put the rules down in his text, the Ashtadhyayi, they haven't really changed since then. And this, I think, has been over 1,000 years at this point. So there's a lot to be said for Sanskrit and the value and the benefit of learning it. Anybody who has the capacity to do so would absolutely benefit from it. And getting the mind set up into a very structured way of thinking then helps in every other aspect and area of life. Here with the essay program, for the most part, the students who come to learn this, they may not have the luxury of having so much time at their disposal to become an expert in Sanskrit, as well as that being kind of an obstacle or a barrier to entry of going and learning the Ayurveda. So at least the level 1 program is available to all students, and beyond that, they can get more of an appreciation for Sanskrit. And if students want to, I always encourage that they go learn more about Sanskrit from somebody who's genuinely an expert, which is not me. I can handle the kindergarten introduction to Sanskrit, but for the real, depths of grammar and all of that stuff, it has to be, I would always say recommend an Indian person for this, who specializes in Sanskrit. There are, of course, Western, specialists in Sanskrit as well. But if you really want that perfect pronunciation, I think it only really comes from Indians or Westerners who have lived in India for like 10 years, which are, again, few and far between. All right, any other questions?
Can I ask a few? So I'm really curious about like the integration of putting this stuff into practice. So you had mentioned like blood work and things like biomedical investigation. So I haven't had any I've never been to an Ayurvedic clinic. I'm familiar with some of the techniques. I don't even know the Sanskrit names, but the oil, like the four-handed massage, enema, things like that, in Panchakarma, and I'm aware of that. So I don't believe there's too many of those clinics in the US. I do have a doctor. She's in Texas, Dr. Apti. Do you know who she is?
Maybe not by that name, maybe by her full name.
Dr. J. Apti.
Yes, J. Apti, yes.
Okay, and I know she had a clinic, but I know she had a clinic in California, but she's in Texas and she doesn't have a clinic. So how do clinics work? And what do you need for a clinic to be able to be doing, all the Western stuff, like the blood work, and, because that's like phlebotomy and, that sounds different than all of this. And I love Dr. J because she helped me. She saved my life. That's my interest in this. And as far as the herbs. So how do the clinics, how do they work?
Awesome. Yeah. So let me, first of all, let me say that in India, right, at least in the training that I got, I was very lucky to work under and train and learn from some really excellent Ayurvedic doctors. And some of these people, they are like X-ray machines on their own. The doctors are so well tuned to diagnosing signs and symptoms and presentations, and most importantly, stages of disease, progressions of disease. And then testing, either with medicines or with single herbs or with any other specific targeted interventions, testing to see what that change does to influence the current state of the individual. And so this is like an area of expertise in and of itself, being able to test well with Ayurvedic principles. Once we get the testing down and we kind of better confirm what we're dealing with, then yes, treatments are often going to be beneficial. Not in every case, but in most cases, there will be a wide variety of possible treatments that may be appropriate for that particular individual in that stage with that presentation. Most of this happens in the Panchakarma theater or the Panchakarma room, and these include all kinds of typically external body treatments, and they may include things like the oil massage that typically is done with 2 therapists, 1 on each side. That's kind of like a synchronized massage, and we change the oil depending on the case. That is typically followed by a steam or a heat treatment of some sort. It may be a dry heat, a moist heat, or full body or a local application. There's a lot of variability that we get with this. And so there literally can be hundreds of combinations of treatments that we can do individually as well as in sequence together to get a particular outcome in a patient immediately, right then and there. This is still separate from the practices of classical Panchakarma, which are these things like the medicated enema, therapeutic vomiting, where we induce vomiting in the individual, therapeutic purgations, where basically downward flow, downward elimination is induced in the individual, nasya, which is the installation of drops into the nasal canals, medicated enema, as well as bloodletting, which can take on a number of various forms. So these are generally the treatments that are done in the Panchakarma theater. Now, the Western medical diagnostics, these are typically not done in an Ayurvedic clinic or hospital. These are typically done in a Western diagnostic center, and then the Ayurvedic doctor simply will write the order for the patient to go get those tests done and then return with the results, or the patient will come with those results. And that's the more common scenario. Why? Because so many patients in India go to the Ayurvedic doctor. Why? Because they didn't get help anywhere else. Western doctors can't figure it out. They tried the naturopath, they tried this, they tried that, they tried everything, and now at the end, they come and say, oh, Ayurvedic doctor, please help. And so it's just to make it clear that, like, we end up with all these very challenging cases, unfortunately, when at the end, where we are least able to help effectively. Had that patient come a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we could have had much better outcomes. And so this is really just more of an understanding that the earlier that a person comes to do Ayurveda, the better they should or can expect their outcomes to be long-term. And so should you happen to go work with folks later, again, you want to have that in your mind, especially as an SA, as an Ayurvedic health coach. You're not going out there and looking for people that are in stage 4 cancer. You're not going out there and looking for people that have had autoimmune conditions for 25 years. You're looking for the ones who are healthy or mostly healthy. And you want to help them hold that for as long as possible. That's where you're going to get the best results with Ayurveda, especially at a health coach level. Does that make sense? Okay, so these diagnostic tests, yes, most Ayurvedic doctors in India that I trained with, they will not refuse a patient, but they will not proceed with treatment until all Western investigations have been completed, because oftentimes there's no other way to confirm the diagnosis, and we have to know what we're dealing with before we try to intervene.
So do you need the Panchakarma clinic to help people?
This is the big question. And in my practice, I have not been able to realistically make that happen, mostly because of the cost of what that means in terms of investment, trying to get a place up and running and happening here in the US. So me being the person that I am, I just find other ways to do it. And what that has turned into is one of my books that is on Amazon is The Complete Guide to Virachana. And so one of the Panchakarma treatments was second of the 5, which is incredibly powerful and beneficial. There is now a book out there that if a person wants to go through this, they can read that book 10 times. They can understand what they're signing up for. They can do it at home under supervision for the entire duration of the minimum 2 weeks of the procedure. And with my patients or clients, at least, I require that they also have a 2-month overview preparatory period plus a 3-month follow-up period afterwards, because it takes 3 to 6 months to get all of the benefits of Panchakarma to come through in the person's physiology. And so we have to make sure that we're still dialing in all the formulations and all the medicines and all the food and everything else for that subsequent 3 to 6 months. So Panchakarma is a big commitment. And yes, this is something that in the SA program, students are also exposed to cases where patients and clients are going through this online. Students can, of course, do this themselves as well if they want to. And I strongly encourage that everybody in the world try Virachana at least once, because the profound changes, I have not found any other intervention that matches what these changes are. And you can't appreciate what those changes are until you yourself go through it and you feel just how much this has changed your physiology in a matter of a couple of weeks. So yes, some people will say a Panchakarma clinic is absolutely mandatory. Some people will say, yes, you have to see your patients in person to do this nadi pariksha, to feel the pulse. I don't think that's necessary whatsoever. I think with the tools and technology that we have today, and with the Western medical diagnostic assessments and tests and everything like that, we can at least service 80% of people who are committed to doing the work and making the changes at home. Now that little end part of being committed and doing the work and making the changes at home, that drops the total number of people down by a lot. So I think that's actually where the barrier is, because to practice Ayurveda effectively requires a lot of investment of time and attention.
So, okay, my biggest question with all of this is, I'm trying to see the integration of how Ayurveda looks in the US, and you're explaining it's really, really hard and not many people are doing it. And so it seems like the only way to make money in this industry is to open your own practice. So how long are we talking? At what point would we be qualified, to start seeing people, to start getting paid? And then at what point would we be qualified to open a clinic and start, taking, how much is it going to take in order to, go through that and have a successful business? Because I'm 32. I know I probably look younger, but I've already done the thing. I'm a soil microbiologist, so I spent 7 years in a program studying with the most renowned soil biologist in the world. And that's great, and I have so much information, but the ability to carry that out in the real world is, I thought it would be oh, great, I would be able to take soil tests, run my tests, help clients. No, it wasn't what I was expecting. It was, you need to run the compost company, you need to start the compost company, own the compost company, the whole thing. And so at 32, I'm wondering how much time is this going to take to make money? I just have to be real about it.
Thank you for being honest about it, because that's a huge concern as well. And the last thing I want to do is set anybody's expectation, like you're going to do this 1-year program and boom, you're going to go out and have 100 people coming to you. It unfortunately, Stephanie, the experience you had with the soil testing is probably very similar to the experience
That's what I figured, yeah.
Ayurveda. I mean, the amount of work that I've had to put in over the last 10 years being back in the US in terms of learning the legal intricacies of practice state by state, I was like, gee, man, I should have become a lawyer after this.
I bet.
What am I doing here? I just want to be the doctor. People are sick. I want to help them get better. That's all.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's very much not the case. And you can see just by the outcome here in today's session. I don't do any marketing. I don't do any promotion. I don't do anything like that. And versus a lot of the other bigger schools that have entire budgets for that stuff. And they're put out as the perceived experts because they're able to promote themselves that way. And so this is where
I did ask, I said, I asked like the college in Southern California, over the phone, like if I go through the program, is there a job opportunity? And they said no. So I understand that you need to create that. And I don't think that's going to change depending on what program you go through.
Not at all. It's very much the state of the situation right now. And you can see, look at some of the Ayurvedic doctors from India who have been in this country for the last 50 or less years. What are they all doing? They all try to have their own little clinic. They have to get their own little patient population, and they struggle to get their business up and running. They struggle to survive. They've got to get the medicines out of India. They have to coordinate everything. They have to run the whole business, do their own taxes, yada, yada. Hire a secretary, hopefully, get some help. But it's a lot of business work. And that's a little bit frustrating. That's what I meant from the very beginning of the call today, where I talked about, like, we don't have any infrastructure here. Mm-hmm. Whereas in India, doctors graduate and they can go apply for a job in a hospital. They have somewhere to go. But in the US, it's no man's land. And so this is why, again, I feel like if a person really wants to learn this, it's better for them to take that investment of 1 year, learn the basics of the bird's eye view of the science and the important parts for maintaining health as the Ayurvedic Health Coach, and then decide, okay, can they integrate this into some existing practice? And some of my most successful students and graduates have done exactly that. They had long-standing clinics in other disciplines and modalities, and now they have an add-on to offer to their existing patients to say, hey, we're able to help you specifically in this way, and if you really want to get better from a deep-rooted level, check this out and try the Ayurveda part.
And those would be the Panchakarma pieces, like the Baba Yanga, or?
No, not even. They just literally are integrating the diet and lifestyle.
Oh, okay. Like food, diet suggestions and, okay.
And if they want to take it to that next level to do treatments, like some of my students have done that as well, they can, but then that's a whole additional thing that they have to learn, which is not part of this first year program. That's a whole year in and of itself to learn all those treatments properly. Okay, but at least you have the foundation, the platform on which to grow into that after doing the basic training.
Got it.
Right. So and this is why I think, the best students for this are going to be medical doctors, nurses, medical professionals who already work with patients and who can learn these principles and then say, hey, okay, this is how I'm going to now improve my patient's outcomes by tweaking these little specific recommendations in diet and lifestyle, which is where Western medicine is exactly lacking. So this would dovetail in very nicely there. But the way that it's taught in most schools is not in this sort of logical scientific methodology. It's a much more sort of spiritually oriented thing. And so to most Western medical professionals, Ayurveda does not make any sense. And so there's that disconnect. But coming from a totally different background where there is no, like for you, Stephanie, there's no basis in the practice of medicine or healthcare, you're really looking, I'm just going to be totally honest.
I did pre-med. I went to school. My first degree was in psychology, and then I did my post-bac in biochem. So I did all pre-med.
Perfect.
So I love anatomy and physiology.
You're in a very good position.
Like cadavers, the whole thing, like really good education in that. I love that.
Perfect. So then your question would be, how much do you need to rely on this as your primary source of income after studying for 1 year? If this needs to meet your regular daily financial needs, and you need to make whatever it is, $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, whatever that amount, that number is, then you need to realistically be looking at this from day one as to how am I going to get people in to do this.
So is this something that I can start doing after 1 year? Like, will I have enough knowledge after 1 year to start doing, let's say, I'm really creative and crafty. Let's say, a little side, you have to, a little side business on the corner of the gym doing Ayurvedic consults, a side business in someone's shop, in someone's, nutrition shop or something, doing consults. Is that something after 1 year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and many of my students and graduates have done this and are doing this right now. Now, the other added benefit that you get here is that you can work with me after graduating.
Okay.
And so what a lot of my graduates did notice when they went off and they just did this all on their own is they would hit a ceiling. And they'd work with a couple folks and they'd get results in the first 2 or 3 months. But then it was like, okay, now what do I do? Because their training is only up to that point. Realistically speaking, after 1 year, how much can you really learn? And so to be able to work in collaboration then helps keep you as the SA on track. Like, okay, now we're looking at a year-long plan, and seasonally, what are we going to try to do with this person to get them to a better state of health? In addition to working with the Ayurvedic doctor, you continue to learn more. And the more you want to keep memorizing, the more that's out there. You keep memorizing medicine names. You keep learning about the treatments. You just, you keep pushing yourself. And yes, you will get there after 4 or 5 years.
And so as far as like my main interest is in the herbs. So I actually did like isolation of herbal compounds in like a natural product chemistry like 10 years ago when I was going to school. So like I've always loved herbs, but that was a more, Western approach, like isolating compounds from cranberries or maple syrup or something like that. And I didn't do that. I went on to soil microbiology because it wasn't like the holistic approach of it. And I didn't know so much about Ayurveda then, but I knew it didn't resonate with me. But as far as, being able to diagnose and treat with herbs, I'm in it for that. So are we talking 5 years to be able to get to that, treatment, like that diagnosis and treatment with the herbs? Is that the 5-year doctorate?
So let me try to break it down a little bit more because there's a lot of variation in that. After 1 year, you will be able to diagnose certain simple, common presentations and know which single herbs to use for those presentations.
No blends, just single.
No blends after 1 year.
Okay.
Just single ones after the first year. Okay. Then as you go on for 2 or 3 years, yes, now you're going to understand more complex presentations and you'll start to learn some of the medicines. But granted, okay, there's going to be some really simple medicines that everybody knows about, like Triphala, that has 3 ingredients in it. And that's kind of everywhere today. It's very, very common. And so, some of those things like students after 1 year, yes, students will feel comfortable with that and familiar with those things. But the difference there is that this is a very experiential style of learning because you're just learning those medicines as you go along, and you have patients who are experiencing that and requiring that in their treatment plan. Versus if you go the straight academic route, you sit down and you memorize 250 single herbs. You sit down and you memorize 100 minerals and metals and all of the purification processes. You sit down and memorize hundreds of combinations, formulations of medicines. And then you go see a patient. And so it's just the order in which this is coming out is a little bit different than the, 4.5 years of rote memorization order that happens in India, because students are afforded that uninterrupted block of time of 4.5 years to pack it all in. But here in the West, like, this is a very real thing. You need to be able to support yourself with doing this. And so to ask you to sit and just memorize for 4.5 years with no guarantee of employment afterwards, nobody's going to do that. You know what I mean?
Totally.
But you can do 1 year, you can see what you can do with it at the end of the year, and if you still want to keep going, you go as far as you want.
I love that.
Okay? Awesome. All right. Any other questions?
I have just one question. I'm basically a yoga teacher, and we do kriyas during our teacher training course, that is internal cleansing of the body. So I believe in Ayurveda also you have several of these techniques like jal neti, that is cleaning your nostrils by warm water with salt, or induced vomiting that you said. I've done all those things. I was wondering whether it's the same that you do in, or is it different?
It is quite different. And even in BAMS, the Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery degree, the 5.5-year full-time education in India, we also do take a short period in second year to learn about yoga, naturopathy, and some of the techniques that are used there just for awareness. We never, we're not capable of prescribing anything like that or having patients practice that, but just so we know what other professionals are also doing. And yes, they are very different from Ayurvedic Panchakarma. And one of the main differences is that, in my opinion, these yogic practices, like the Kriya practices, are more meant for a daily maintenance type of cleansing. Mm-hmm. They're a little more gentle, and they don't go as deeply into the body. Whereas then when we go into the realm of Panchakarma, we're going down, deep into the crevices of the tissues and the organ systems and the functioning of the human body to go find that pathology and break it and separate it from the physical body. And so we use a lot more oil-based and fat-based medicines in these practices than we normally would find in yogic practices.
Okay.
And the sequencing is much more complex. The time duration to complete even one of these Panchakarma processes is typically much more complex and longer.
I see.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, great. I think this was pretty helpful. Stephanie, how do you feel?
Yeah, really, really informative. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome, and I appreciate you coming. This class was very small, as are most of the classes, it seems. But the benefit of that is you get a lot of interaction with me. You can have all your questions asked and hopefully answered. And it's my job to make sure that if you come in and you do the SA program, that you know Ayurveda and you are confident in what you know when you complete it.
Love that.
Yeah, and so the small class format is really helpful for that as well. There's nowhere to hide.
Love that. How many, you might have covered this on your site. How many meetings, like a week or a month, is it?
Right. So right now the program is 2 academic semesters, 15 weeks each, and there are approximately 6 to 7 hours of 6 hours of recorded lecture per week. 1 hour of one-on-one student mentoring with a previous graduate who also works very closely with me in the clinical format. And then 2 hours of live class each week. And the live class 2 hours are now, after we're going into our 6th year now, and this is finally changing. It's going to be for US time zones, Monday, I believe it'll be, I want to say 3 p.m. Pacific time, but check the website, please, and you'll see the schedules and everything are listed on there.
And so this is 1 2-hour session a week.
Yes, live. Live with me, 2 hours, and then again, the 1 hour of the one-on-one student mentoring every week. And just so you know, the student mentoring, we try to slot that in the day before the live class. So you'd want to have your Sunday afternoons open for that. And what will happen is you'll kind of be like prep tested.
Oh, cool.
Live class, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Jessica, can I watch this recording since I missed the earlier part of it?
Yes, absolutely, sir. I will. I'm gonna, with both of your permission, I'm gonna put this up on YouTube on the AYU Academy channel.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think this will be really helpful for a lot of other potential students. So thank you, Stephanie, for coming with such great questions and attention.
No problem. Thank you for answering.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Guru Raj, for joining. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I wish you all the best with all your Sanskrit studies. I hope you go as far as you possibly want to.
Thank you so much.
Learn everything.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'm available via email, Stephanie and Guru Raj, both of you. If you have any questions, feel free to just reply to one of the mailing list emails, and you can get to me directly there, okay?
Perfect. I'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, take care, everybody. Bye. Nice to meet you.